You remember that elementary school game called telephone? Well, in case you didn't play it, here's how it went down. The teacher would start at one side of the classroom and whisper into the child's ear something like, "My dog likes to chase tennis balls." That child would then whisper what they heard into the next child's ear. And the process would keep going all the way around the classroom. By the time it reached the last child, they would announce the phrase, and it would be something like, "Purple monkeys eat spaghetti on Tuesdays." The class would then erupt into laughter, and the teacher would finally reveal what the original phrase actually was. Usually, the teacher's purpose was to show how rumors spread and how messages can be distorted, sometimes even deliberately changed by someone to get a different result. Now, isn't it true that the Bible was created in the same way? Isn't it just a centuries-long game of telephone? Constantly getting changed through misunderstandings, mistakes, and even intentional edits. Sometimes to push political agendas, sometimes just to reshape the story into someone's favor. If that's the case, then there is no way that this book could be trusted. And it would seem ridiculous for anyone to base their life on it. But is that really true? Now, before we start digging in, though, let's pause for a quick logic check. For any comparison to be fair, it has to be apples to apples. If you compare an apple to an orange, they might both be a fruit, but they're not the same thing. In the same way, just because information was passed down in history doesn't mean it automatically works like the telephone game. If the way the Bible was transmitted is totally different in the details, then the telephone game comparison falls apart. So let's look at what really happened. Was the Bible ever actually passed down like the telephone game? First, let's start with oral tradition. Before any of the Bible as we know it was written down. I'm talking back in the days of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and even during the Exodus. The stories and the teachings of God's people were passed on by word of mouth. At first glance, that might sound exactly like the telephone game. But here's where the comparison breaks down. In the telephone game, a message is whispered from child to child in secret, where no one else hears. By the time it reaches the end, it is usually just nonsense. But in the ancient world, oral tradition was public and done by adults. Stories were told in front of whole communities where mistakes could be corrected on the spot. That is a very different process, and one that came with the pressure of being corrected in front of everyone listening. And this was true even during Israel's slavery in Egypt. Families and clans preserved their identity by retelling these stories aloud together. Oppression didn't erase oral tradition. It often made it stronger, because passing on their history was the one way that they could hold on to who they really were. Now, second, in the telephone game, there's no training. It's just kids having fun, usually even trying to make it silly. But in the ancient Near East, memorization was a serious skill. People trained to preserve and repeat information accurately. Entire stories, genealogies, and laws. These weren't just casual tales told for entertainment. They carried the identity of families, tribes, and nations, and everyone understood their importance. These stories were also tied to celebrations and acts of remembrance. For example, Israel's yearly Passover meal wasn't just about food. It was a way to retell the Exodus story so that every generation could hear it again and remember what God had done. So oral tradition in the ancient world, long before the first scrolls of Scripture were written, was public, disciplined, and reinforced by the community. It was designed to preserve the truth, not distort it. If we were going to compare it to anything, it's not the telephone game. It's more like the teacher reciting a lesson to everyone in the classroom, where each student then memorizes it together. And if one gets it wrong, the others immediately correct them. New Testament scholar Craig Bloomberg once told Lee Strobel something similar. He said if you really wanted the telephone game to compare, you would have to imagine people stopping every so often and checking back with the original speaker while the whole group listened and corrected the mistakes. That's much closer to how oral tradition actually worked. But even that doesn't capture how seriously these cultures took the responsibility of preserving their stories. But oral tradition was only the first stage. Eventually, God's words weren't just spoken, they were written. The Bible itself points to Moses as the one who began recording God's words. Exodus 24:4 says, Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. From that point forward, the Bible wasn't only spoken, it was written. So that raises the next question. Maybe oral tradition wasn't like the telephone game. But what about the written transmission? Once things were copied, wasn't it still just copies of copies of copies like a longer telephone game? That sounds reasonable at first. But again, the comparison doesn't hold up. In the telephone game, you only have one fragile chain of whispers. If one person gets it wrong, everyone after them gets it wrong too. The mistakes spread and there is no way to fix it. But that's not how the Bible was transmitted once it was written. Think of it like a tree. The original writing, like what Moses wrote, is the trunk. From that trunk, scribes made copies, and those copies spread out to different towns and communities, like branches growing outward. And here's why that matters. The branches, the copies, could always be compared back to the trunk, the original, and they could also be compared to each other. That meant that accidental mistakes could be spotted and corrected, and it made intentional changes almost impossible. For someone to corrupt the text, they would have to gather every single branch from every town, every synagogue, every community, and then change them all the same way and put them back. And even if they tried, they would still have to deal with the trunk itself, the original writing. In practice, that kind of coordinated corruption would have been impossible. And history even backs this up. Think of our tree again. For a long time, the oldest trunk we had, the Hebrew manuscripts, dated to the Middle Ages. Then in the 1940s, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Those manuscripts were about 1,000 years older than the ones we had been using at that time. Suddenly, we could compare an older trunk with our current one. And when we did, they matched almost word for word across 1,000 years of copying. They weren't letter for letter identical, but the differences were tiny and the message was the same. That is powerful evidence of just how carefully the Bible was preserved and passed down through the ages. For the New Testament, the evidence is even stronger. We don't just have a few copies. We have thousands in Greek and in other ancient languages, some going back very close to the time of the originals. And when scholars compare them, the overwhelming majority of the differences they have found are just minor. Things like spelling, word order, or little slips of the pen. None of these affect the core message of the Bible. And here is the striking part. Even critics agree on this. Bart Ehrman, a respected textual critic and one of the most well-known skeptics of Christianity, has openly admitted that no essential belief of Christianity hangs on these variations. In his book, Misquoting Jesus, he even said that none of those differences touch a core doctrine of the faith. That means whether you are a believer or a skeptic, the conclusion is the same. The message of the New Testament has been preserved. So when people say that the Bible is just like the telephone game, they're missing how completely different the process really was. In the oral stage, Stories were told public, corrected by the community, and memorized with care. Once they were written, the process became even stronger, like a tree with a solid trunk and countless branches. And because those branches spread far and wide, the message stayed safe. No single mistake or change could take over. The process made sure that the original message wasn't lost and that God's word remained stable and reliable across centuries. That is the key point. The Bible was never a game, and it was never left to chance. God's people knew their history and covenant with Him were too important to risk. They preserved it with discipline and passed it on with care. And here's what that means for you. You don't have to wonder if the Bible in your hands is a distorted version of the truth. You can read it with confidence, knowing its message has been preserved with more care and accuracy than any other work from the ancient world. The same God who acted in history made sure His word was carried faithfully so that you could know Him today. That is a far cry from the telephone game, where the message always ends in confusion and nonsense. The Bible story isn't distorted whispers. It is the living record of God's work, preserved so that you can build your life on it with confidence. And that's what this channel is all about. Here before the gates, we tackle one big question at a time. Questions about God, the Bible, truth, and the Christian faith. If you want to go deeper in what you believe and why, hit the subscribe button. Drop me a comment with your biggest question. Like this video if it helped you think more clearly. And if you know someone who wrestles with these type of questions, share this video with them. It might be the conversation that they have been waiting for, because the truth can stand up to your toughest questions. And the truth is worth finding before the gates.